Today, we're speaking with Darryl Rode, one of the Keystone Pictures partners, who also happens to be my wonderful husband. We met on set, which I was fortunate enough to be on a shoot with Darryl for a wedding story, of all things. And we met, and I guess you could say the rest is history. We have a long history, and in fact, a lot of the relationships that we have from those years, we still continue to carry on with them today. So we've been very fortunate in our lives. So welcome, Darryl Rode. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Of course, I know a little bit about you, just a little, but hopefully I'll learn some new things today that we've never discussed. I remember a story that you told me that got you into wanting to be a photographer. Somebody had given you a camera.
Yeah, when I was about 12 or 13, I would build model cars and trucks. And one time I got a little plastic man to scale. And he was like supposed to be part of the scene with the dragster. And he had his arms up like this, like he was covering his ears. And I painted them all correct. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to make it look like they're crashed? So I would take the model car out on the sidewalk and I would, make it like it had fire and smoke. And I'd have the guy sometimes be the victim. I put a little white blanket over him like he died and some red dye like it was blood. And, I was just on the edge of being a teenager, and I'd take my parents' camera and I'd take pictures. And then we get them back from being developed, like, wow, where'd this happen? I'm like, oh, I fooled you, Then I started doing like forced perspective where I'd hold, like a truck up next to my parents' house. And I would take a picture like, wow, where'd that tractor trailer come from? Like, when was that up here? But it was all just a trick. And I got it. Wow, you could really, really tell a story with models. And I thought that could be really fun. But what I really liked was the fact that it was like news. I was making kind of like news things happen. I realized at that point you need a better camera. And we didn't have money for a better camera, so I just would wait it out, and someday I'll get a better camera. And then we had a friend visiting us from New York, and he sat and talked to me, as a 13-year-old now or 14-year-old. He reminded me that you can be anything you want to be. If you have a desire and a wish to be a photographer, you will be a photographer. And I just really had the potential that, someone believed in me and that I could pursue and I could achieve my dream. Surprisingly, he bought me a Nikon DSLR camera with a Nikon lens, which was a real camera that actually shot 35 millimeter film, a real lens that you could really manipulate, perspective and macro. And it just opened me up to photography in a bigger way. So I always thank Frank Boggio for that opportunity. He was one of my first guides and mentors. And at that point, I started pursuing that and decided I wanted to go to college and learn it more formally. But I really studied mass media, radio, television. It was just a very broad segment of mass media. But as I was in that program it was a 2-year associate's degree, my intention was to go on to a 4-year program. Like all my friends that were going to college, they're all going for 4-year. But we had to do an internship at the end of the second year. So I got an internship at a local TV news station, WHP in Harrisburg. And I was just doing teleprompter scripts. I was just being the gopher, whatever needed to be done. But I really kind of hung out with the photographers. I watched them go out on shoots. I went with them on shoots. I carried the tripod. I sat in on the edits and they said, get me this, get me that. And then it got to the point that after the news was over, that I could sit around and play around with things. And they saw that I had some potential. But when my internship was over in May, they said, I'm sorry, we don't have any work for you, but we'd encourage you to go to Florida. And, Florida, they hire everybody. So I went to Florida like 2 weeks later. And I went to a local TV station like, we'll hire you. I'm like, I'm in. And they said $135 a week. Now, let's put this in perspective. This was the 1980s. That's probably like $400 a week now. And I could not even pay the rent at $400 a month in Florida then. I'm like, I'm going to subsidize myself to work here. And while I was there in that moment of frustration, the news director from WHP in Harrisburg called up my parents, because there were no cell phones. And they said, is Darryl there? No, he's in Florida looking for work. Oh, he actually went down there to try to find a job. Yeah, they offered him one. And Frank goes, whoa. Can I talk to Darryl? Have him call me. I called him from Florida. I said, you need to come in. We want to talk to you. So I went back to Pennsylvania, went back to Harrisburg. And in those days, in a small station, The news director was in charge of the news department, like the general of the news department. But the general of the station is the general manager. And so I'm in the office with the GM and the news director. And I'm like, oh boy, this is scary, because that'll be an intern
Well, you were
again.
a kid.
I was 19, 20. I was 20 because I was going to go, if I didn't get a job, I was going to go to Penn State for 2 more years. It's kind of like, if I don't get a job, go for it. They said, we used to have a program here that was called an apprenticeship, and it didn't work out. But we believe you're different. We're going to let you work here for, at that time, would have been $300 a week, not $100, with $300 a week. And I thought, I could live at home. That's great. And you're just going to be an apprentice. You're going to shadow the camera people and the editors. I'm like, I don't even need to think about this. Yes. I was there 2 weeks. And because it was a small station, I was in the shadow program. There was a big fire in downtown Harrisburg right as the news was getting ready to go on. But the 3 photographers that work there are also editors. They're busy editing the news, trying to get everything ready. And the news director's looking around like, we have nobody to go cover it. And I'm just sitting there, like, and all of a sudden a little beam of light comes on. What about Darryl? I'm like, oh, dear Lord. Take a news car, camera, tripod, and just go shoot it. Just show the fire. So I race downtown. I set it up. I do a slow zoom in. I do a slow zoom out. I race back. They said, there's no time to edit this. Just re-rack the tape and play it live. I'm like, oh, man. Like, they're not even going to, fix my video if I goofed up. It went backwards. And they said, now footage in from downtown Harrisburg, high-rise fire. This footage just in. They hit play. And I was petrified. And there was a silence in the newsroom. And there it is, unedited footage. And then there's a zoom into the flames and a zoom out. And then they go on to the next thing. I'm like, whew. And everybody goes, yay! Everyone's clapping. And I thought, what just happened there? That was crazy. It was basically a week later, they said, we're going to have you go out and do some of our small packages, the county fair, the auto show, not reporters. And within basically 2 weeks, that apprenticeship kind of faded away. And I was sort of a maid photographer, trial by fire, literally fire in a high rise. And at that point, then I just went on for 2.5 years, and I enjoyed there. Harrisburg has 2 stories, 3 Mile Island and Capitol Hill. And there aren't many other stories. And I found that I was doing Capitol Hill and stories about 3 Mile Island because it was only a few years after the accident. And I was kind of getting burnt out. But I like news. And I decided to put a demo together, a demo tape, and then send that out.
By the way, the other crazy coincidence is that small TV station in West Palm Beach, Florida, where you would have had a job, I was working.
So you took the 150 a week.
I think I was making $3.50 an hour, some ridiculous amount of money. And they were so excited. The news director calls me and he's like, you are one of the best people we've ever had. You're running tapes, you're editing, you're going out. We're sending you out on stories as a reporter. You're phenomenal. I'm going to give you the biggest raise I've ever given anybody here. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to make $5 an hour. No, he gave me 15 cents more an hour. It's like, so I got to get out of this fucking business. Oh, excuse me. Beep.
So you were making $150 a week then. So
basically,
you could not afford
my father and mom had to help me, Right. Well, I was commuting for about an hour and 10 minutes every day, driving back and forth, but I was working at night and coming home at 3:00 in the morning. And my parents said, you know what, we're not comfortable with that anymore. We'll help you find a place, which was great. But it was a great, valuable experience. And we could have met then, but it wasn't in the card. I just want to go back a second to talk about your early days, even, before you were in school. When you were a kid, you were making those movies, but you were also making movies with your friends, with a video camera. It was 8mm camera. A Super 8 film camera. Yeah. We'd load a cartridge and action. We'd shoot scenes. We made movies. We did scripted. We did unscripted. We did satire like Saturday Night Live. We did the Weekend Update, and, I remember I was the anchor man because I usually got the camera because I liked the camera. But my buddies did not want to be on camera. So okay, I'll teach you how to run it. I'll be on camera because I wasn't afraid to be on camera. And we did some fun things. And I still have those movies. They were a real treasure. I kind of learned storytelling and editing while I was in high school. We made some fun
little films. Had a lot of fun. I didn't know that was going to spin me forward into this business, but from my friends in college, from my friends growing up, they all said, you're the only one to actually get to where you went learning that stuff, which I think I was lucky. And I had mentors like Frank Boggio, who inspired me and got me a camera, Fred Caesar, who brought me back from being an intern to an apprentice. They were real solids. And I like this expression, everybody needs a big. You can look for your big, or your big will find you. In both cases, my big found me, but my ears were open, my eyes were ready, and I heard and I listened and I basically followed their advice.
Which is also a good piece of advice for people, young people who are looking to get into this industry is keep your eyes and ears open and be a good listener, right? And,
absolutely.
And you sort of had a fiery intro into Philadelphia industry as well. Talk a little bit about your time at KYW in Philadelphia.
I had a lot of fire in my career. But, in order to get that bigger step, I'll make some demo tapes. You made tapes and you sent them out. And I sent the demo tapes out to Baltimore, Pittsburgh. They were bigger markets, but they weren't top 10. They were all like top 20. I thought they were a little bit of a reach from Harrisburg, which was the 50th largest market. Maybe I wasn't ready for that, but I did anyway. But the funny thing happened, I was freelancing with the blessings of the news station I was at because I worked night shift, 3 to 11. The Capitol had a bureau in Harrisburg. Remember I said Harrisburg has 2 stories, 3 Mile Island and Capitol Hill? Well, Capitol had a bureau for Westinghouse, which was a Group W conglomerate of Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Boston, a few other stations across. San Francisco was also in that group, and they would contribute news feeds. Big story in Harrisburg today, and they would feed it out. The cameraman there was getting old, had some illness, so the reporter, a former WHP reporter, now working as the bureau chief, said, can we have Darryl to come down? I promise Fred we'll be done with him by 2:30. He can come back and work for you. So I worked a couple double shifts. I didn't mind. I made extra money. And then the worst thing that happens to you is sometimes the best. I broke their camera. I'm like, I broke this camera. Then you're going to have to take it to Philadelphia and get it fixed. So on my day off, I took a buddy with me. I drove to the big city of Philadelphia for the first time. I found KYW in the streets of Philadelphia. I rang the bell. I brought the camera to engineering. They said, look, you got to go back with a camera. We'll see if we can fix this by the time you're here. Why don't we show you around the newsroom? I'm like, oh, this is so cool. What a big bustling newsroom. I met some players there, and a person said, you should send us a demo tape. We have a new management coming in, and they're looking for young people. Like, you could say that back then. It wasn't a bad thing, like, age discrimination. I said, yeah, I'll send a tape, whatever. Like, I didn't expect much. Sent a tape, didn't hear anything. I figured, well, that's it. Then I called down. I said, I'm just going to call. Like, did you guys ever get my tape? And they said, oh, yeah. They're looking around. No, I'll send another one. I thought, okay, well, they're not interested. I sent another one, got a phone call, went down and met another person named Ellen Hiker, who basically saw my tape, loved what she saw. I want to hire you in 2 weeks. I'm like, boom. How much is it going to pay? $800 a week in 1984 is like $20-some hundred a week now. I'm like, I'm in the union. That's a no-brainer. I said yes to that, and I started 3 weeks later, and I was at KYW for 7 years.
I'm sure they missed you in Harrisburg, too.
I missed them. They were so proud of me. Like, you go. They took me out for beers. They gave me a send-off party. They're so proud to see that, this intern 2.5 years was becoming a major top 5 photog editor.
That's a huge leap.
That's a big leap in our business. And I think, I had a big Ellen Hiker who took a chance on me, believed in what she saw. And I hope she never regretted it. I don't think she did, but
I don't think so.
It's a good spin.
You started at KYW, you were running the live truck, right? And you were working nights?
I worked nights, but I was always a partner because there too, we were called summer relief, which meant you weren't really full-time, but you were.
That's how they got away with hiring people.
Yeah. Even then, but they would sometimes call it temp hires. You would cover for the summer, but summer was over. So I'm like, am I going to be here another couple of weeks? And because I started at the end of August, it was September, like all the vacations were kind of ending, and they kept some of us around. And I was one of the people they kept around, and they started to fast track me. Back then you had to work 2 people in a van. a driver and, a cameraman and an audio and a tech, two people. And I would get on live vans and I did some crazy stuff, and that was all new and never been in a live van. They got a helicopter. I started to do helicopter live shots. They got a KU truck, which is a satellite truck. I would go on as the camera guy because I did not know how to run all that stuff. So I had tremendous opportunities at KYW. And I really, by the time I got to, I'd been there a year, I felt I belonged there. I felt I was part of the team and I was a starter. And that was a great feeling to know that you are who people want to work with. They said, some people don't want to work with certain photographers, but they want to work with you. I'm like, that's good and bad, because there's reasons they don't want to work with that reporter because they're nuts. But I enjoyed working with everybody. I had the right personality, and I got to go some pretty crazy places. So it was a good experience till 1991.
What was it like to be, shooting out of a helicopter? Not everybody has ever even taken a ride in a copter, let alone hang out of the door.
Yeah, well, in those days,
they didn't have, Darryl, did they have those Tyler mounts back then? Or
now they have a ball that's on the front of the helicopter that's run by a robotic camera controller inside. So your door stays closed. You're nice and warm. You're air conditioned. You're cozy. You can zoom in really far and very steady. But then it was on your shoulder, feet on the railing. We had a monkey harness, which you put around your waist and clipped it, had a big bite like a carabiner, and that was locked off with a wire to the frame of the helicopter.
So you were literally hanging out of the helicopter.
You could pull on the wire and it wouldn't let you go any further. And I started to pull on the wire and realized there's my limit. Then I could really kind of relax and take the pictures. And there was tricks to shooting with a video camera. You'd always be doing a zoom to take some of the bumps and the chop out of it. I enjoyed that. I would go in rotation during the 6 o'clock news. We would just go up and fly. Okay, send a helicopter up at 5 o'clock. We'll see you at 6:30. If you find something going on, go find it. And Scotty Hibbs and I went for rides. We went for rides 90 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. We did some incredible flights because there was nothing to do unless they said fire on the Schuylkill Expressway. We would come back. But and with a helicopter, you'd be back in 2 minutes. It was really fast.
But you had a harrowing experience on a helicopter once.
I almost died in a helicopter, and it's a very scary thing to recall, but we were doing news promos. We got in another helicopter, which I was not used to, and it had a monkey harness on it, and I put it on. And we were filming our regular helicopter flying over Center City, Philadelphia. There's Chopper 3 right around City Hall. There's me and another helicopter getting pictures of it for a news promo. And I started to lean forward and feel that wire on my back, my monkey harness tied me in. And I realized, it's just really long one. I don't know this one. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to lean back. And I was going to lean out on the railing like I usually do. But because it was a different helicopter and I didn't feel that tug at my waist, I'm like, this one's not the right length for me. So I'm not going to push it and get to that tipping point, So we got our shot. Okay, we're good. We can go back. I sat back. I put the camera on my knee and I wanted to see why is this thing so long? I picked it up and it was not connected. I could have fallen out of the helicopter. And the blood ran for me. I'm like, oh my God. If that was our Channel 3 helicopter, I would have leaned and I would have fallen. But I didn't because it was a different aircraft. So that was sort of realizing whoa, you're just seconds away from falling to your death there.
But that was a valuable lesson to always check, just like, somebody who's jumping out of an airplane with a parachute, right? Yeah. You've got to check all of your...
I remember connecting it because you always connect it and you pull.
Right.
But it was a different harness and it came loose. And it wasn't connected. So that would have been one of those phone calls to the family when it happened. I would have made the news. There was nobody there that wasn't a friend. We were in the trenches together. We had sort of a combat mentality. We each have each other's backs. We would try to out-hustle Channel 6, who was the powerhouse in the market. We would always try to be better, faster, quicker. And we won a lot of awards for it. Those years we were there, we had a great team of people. And, I really just have great memories there. I do miss it in some ways.
Well, you had a lot of amazing experiences, covered Super Bowls and traveled the world, really. You went to Africa with some major political leaders and religious leaders. And you also had a unique experience that many people may have heard of, the move situation, but don't a lot of younger people don't know exactly what happened. The challenge of being put in a situation where there's danger around you, but always knowing that you have to deliver the goods, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that situation and that experience for you. And that is one of the things you won an Emmy Award for, correct?
It is. I think, first of all, the primer to this conversation is I learned very quickly in a big city with a lot of different neighborhoods and different kinds of people that you need to assimilate. In order to create rapport, to develop photojournalism, you have to assimilate. You have to, if you're in a wealthy neighborhood, you show, you act like they do. If you are in a place that's got something going on, you need to sort of be like the people there. You have to relax. You have to fit it. If I went to South Philly and we went to, what was it? Palumbo's. Kitty Palumbo would see Channel 3 and says, you got to come in and eat. You better go sit down and eat because you
even if you're not hungry.
Yes, because it's South Philly, and you do not make them angry by saying, I don't have time to eat. And I didn't have time to eat, but I ate quickly, and I was always well received there. And any of the neighborhoods that I went into, I would take the time to talk to people with my camera beside me, not up on my shoulder. And I'd ask them, what's going on? What happened? Man, that's horrible. And it really was. I mean, I was trying to feel their angst, pain, frustration with them. And that created rapport and allowed me to get intimacy and still do my job as a photojournalist. And that was what happened when I went to West Philadelphia on a Mother's Day that year. Walt Hunter was the Channel 3 star cop reporter, crime reporter, and he said to the desk, send somebody out. My cameraman needs to go to lunch. And I was just going out to fill in for this guy. And then Walt sees me and goes, listen, take all the batteries, all the tapes you can carry. I'm going to create a police diversion here because the neighborhood was getting shut off in West Philly. And I want you to go down this alley, and I want you to get a room with a view to the Move House. Now, Move was a radical back to nature group. They all had the surname Africa, like Ramona Africa, John Africa. They were not unknown to Philadelphians. A few years before, they had a place in Powelton Village. A police officer was shot during that siege, and Move was generally not respected because they were disrupting the neighborhood. This was a working class neighborhood in West Philly where people got up and they went to work early, and the last thing they needed to hear were bullhorns till 2 and 3 in the morning with their rhetoric coming out of it. Dogs and cats would disappear in the neighborhood. They thought maybe they were eating them. The kids were not going to school, and so truancy was a real issue. They were not keeping good hygiene. There was garbage and litter around. And these people said, "This is if you've been to West Philly, there's some nice rows out there," and they said, we got to do something. So Wilson Good at the time decided that we're going to need to get some police
Who's the mayor?
action.
Wilson Good was the mayor.
He was the mayor, decided to say, we got to stop this. So they told the people of Osage Avenue and that area, 69th Street, 68th, 67th, listen, I know it's Mother's Day. Just get out of here for a few hours. We're going to take care of this and get these people to come out of the house. So in the meantime, I'm there to relieve a person for lunch break, and suddenly I find myself going down a back alley, knocking on doors, no one's home. These two guys answered the door. I said, hey, you guys got a view of the Move House? He goes, oh, man, we got a great view of the Move House. I said, do you mind if I just take a look? I'm with Channel 3. Yeah, I see you with Channel 3. I went in, I went up. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is the perfect view of the Move House. I could not pick a better house. I got my radio, and I called back, and they said, rent the room for the night. I'm like, I'm here for a lunch break, really? I said, no problem. So I said to the guys, like, hey, how about we rent this room? And they said, yeah, cool. And so they were told to go out to the Channel 3 news van and pick up a bag with $200 in cash in it, which gave me the right to be there for 24 hours, which I didn't think I would be. And then after that, I wasn't going anywhere, and nothing was happening. To the police credit, they tried sending negotiators down, knocking on the door, trying to ask the people down the block, hey, why don't you guys just give up? They sent down all different types of police officers, plain clothes, different cultural backgrounds. They tried everything, and they were not leaving. And so then at that point, the police said, they're not coming out the easy way. It's going to be the hard way. So as day turned into night, all these people that lived there just stepped out of the house. They took nothing with them except their family, the residents. The only people left, in theory, were the people in the move house. But little did the police know that in that one house was myself, two of these young guys. And pretty soon another knock on the door came from the USA Today, and a gentleman with a camera, still photographer, came in and said, "Do you mind if I hang out here and take some pictures?" I'm like, "Look, I paid rent for this room. You're not TV," because they were just shooting stills. I figured, why not? It might be safety in numbers here. At least there's two of us. It turned out to be a very good decision on my part on one hand to have Steve next to me. And then it got heavy really fast. It became night. The police towed all the cars out of the street. Every car was removed from the street. The electric was turned off. It got really, really hot. I would just remember sitting there, not even moving, just sweating. The guys downstairs were smoking so much pot, they could care less. This was a party. They were having a good time. And I'm thinking,
were you scared?
Of course I was scared, because the move people, they were really only a quarter block away from me. And they would say things on their bullhorns, and "We see you people peeking out the windows. We got something special for you." I'm like, they see me peeking out the window. Do they have a rocket launcher? Are they going to shoot me? I didn't know. I was afraid of the move people only because I didn't know their story. And later we find out that they were very poorly armed, and they really were just a lot of noise. And they were disruptive. They were civil disruption. And ultimately, we get to the overnight hours, and I got the full brunt of what move was to the neighbors, and I sympathized with the neighbors. They got under bullhorn around midnight, and they went nonstop till 3 a.m., taking turns till one would get hoarse. They'd pass the microphone, and they would just continue their rhetoric. They said everything against the administration. They were anti-Wilson Good. They were anti-police. They were anti-neighborhood. They wanted to be left alone. They threatened to pour gasoline down both of the houses beside them, the left and the right house. I heard breaking glass in the windows on the roofs. I assumed they were dumping gas. I thought, man, this is a powder keg. At that point, sunrise begins, and as the light comes up, what was this little neighborhood in West Philly became the front lines of a police action, and I was in it. There were two guys up on the roof beside me with a machine gun, two police officers wearing, SWAT gear. In front of me were SWAT. There were helicopters going over top. I'm like, oh man, this is going to hit the fan fast. So at that point, right out in front of me in the street going this way, Osage went straight down, and I was looking at the house on Osage. In front of me, there were a lot of police gathered. This was sort of their observation point. They shot tear gas at the house. I heard one pop, a single shot pop. It was answered by a pop, 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 pop. Next thing you know, wood was splintering, glass was breaking all around me. I'm like, it just lit up. I kept rolling. The window was open to my right. I put my lens right against the window frame, and I hid behind the wall because my viewfinder was here. So at least I wasn't in a window. I thought the wood would protect me, and I just kept rolling, and I kept seeing everything. The still photographer got really excited. He threw open the sash. He entered the window. He started shooting all these great photos. And the guys in front of us turned around and go, "Who the hell is that?" Boom! 5 SWAT guys kicked down our door. The 2 guys downstairs smoking pot were like, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot." Next thing you know, they're coming up the steps, all these SWAT guys with machine guns aimed at us. Like, "Who the beep are you? And what the beep are you doing here?" And I'm like, "We're press, don't shoot, don't shoot." It was press. We got drug out of there on our stomachs, down the step on our stomachs, to the back room until the lieutenant came over and basically read us the riot act. "We're going to jail, blah, 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 blah. But before you boys go to jail, we want your footage." Now, that sets off a trigger in a photojournalist. I just captured history that the world must see. I wasn't taking a side in the story. I'm simply showing what was going on. And me giving up my footage and Steve giving up his film is, to me, a real breach of our rights to have open media. Luckily, Steve was a bigger mouth than me. He goes, "There's no way you're getting my film. There's just no way you're getting my film." And guess what? The cop said, "We are getting your film." They grabbed his big, beautiful Nikon camera with a long lens, and they started to take it off. The strap caught his nose. They broke the lens off the camera. They opened the back, and they spooled out the film. It was all exposed. I'm like, oh my God. I said, "Look, my footage is upstairs in the recorder." They drug me up the steps. I reached in. Now, I had already had two tapes. I had a tape that was in the recording machine and I had a tape that was my spare. I took both those tapes. I quickly did a shuffle. I put one down the back of my pants, which was the shot tape that had all the footage on, and I kept the blank in my hand. And I went down there and looked at it. Okay, are you going to give us a rough time too? No, sir. Just get me the hell out of here. Here's my tape. I gave him a blank. They escorted me to the police lines where the news was set up. And in my hand was the footage that said, feed it. Rewind, play, and this footage just in for the scene. Darryl Rode on the scene there. Oh my God, they could see it. Nobody else could see what was going on because the airspace was closed. All we saw was smoke, and you heard a lot of gunshots. But this was footage that was from the front. And at that point, Steve had nothing. He decided to go back in and try to do it all over again, only to get met by the police who were waiting for him. He spent the rest of the day in the squad car with the air conditioning.
I'm surprised he wasn't in jail.
They were going to take him downtown, but it got worse and worse and worse before the bomb went off, that he basically spent the rest of the day in the car, and then he let him loose. But he has really no footage. So
they never figured out that you gave them a blank tape, huh? Because they could have come back after you, but obviously you were a little problem for them. Because as we know it, history will show that Wilson Goode basically blew up an entire city block, which was an awful situation.
I mean, it ensued for months later. There was years of testimony involved in the MOVE Commission, and I heard it from being there. I heard it from those involved. My summation of that event was it truly remains the darkest day in Philadelphia history, that any administration would choose to blow up a bunker on the roof for civil disobedience. That's all we're talking about, civil disobedience, and the lives of the MOVE members were the cost, regardless of how it happened. Like, they didn't intend it to cause a fire, but then there was a decision, let it burn. Fire as a weapon in a community by police is a crime. It's a crime in war to use fire as a weapon. So in the end of the day, it is something that never should be forgotten, that our city had a very, very dark cloud over it. I think to this day, it's hard to not remember that.
Yeah, it's a difficult period of time for the city. Well, I'm going to just move into something more positive and fun as an experience that you had. You were working for KYW during Live Aid, right?
Yeah, I did.
So you had really the gambit of experiences. You went from like the worst to the best, right?
Yeah. Well,
what was it like being on stage with all those entertainers, like amazing people that, we all want to get near them?
Well, you don't just get there by asking. You can't ask to get backstage coverage for Live Aid. You just don't. You don't ask for that. It's a reward. So I remember there was like 2 weeks before, I had to cover the 4th of July on the Parkway, and it was the Beach Boys playing, and they estimated 1.1 million people on the Parkway. And my assignment was womp womp, the crowd. So I had to cover the crowd. And I'm telling you, I parked at Aikens Oval in my news car. This great reporter, Robin, and I were tearing around. How's it feel to be here? What do you, oh, it's great. Getting sound bites and doing news packages for the noon, the 6 o'clock, the 11 o'clock, baking hot, super hot summer. And I remember when it was over, I went back to my news car. I was so glad to leave. It was like 18 hours of mayhem. I had beer thrown at me. My camera was pulled off my shoulder at one point. People yelled at us that were drunk. I go back to my news car and I realized that people used it for a venue to stand on. My roof was caved down. My hood and trunk were smashed. And I remember driving back to the news station like this because I couldn't sit in the car. And I went to Ellen, who was my boss, that Monday. I said, I'm so sorry. I mean, I had no idea this was going to happen. It was just like the worst day. She goes, well, that is a terrible thing to happen, but how about in 2 weeks you do backstage at Live Aid? I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And so that's what got me in there. So all day we were backstage with, Mick Jagger, Tina Turner, like all the big names at the time, and with an entertainment reporter named Trudy. And that was really, you knew it when it happened that you were someplace in rare earth, that you were not just there with celebrities, which doesn't really matter that much to me, but it was a movement. It was an energy of giving and goodwill. And to see JFK was a rare venue, 120,000 people from the floor, the ceiling, not the ceiling, from the field, the stage, everything. It just filled. And when they did We Are the World, in those days, you did use a lighter before you held your phone up. It was breathtaking. It was like seeing a whale come out of the water, like, oh my God, this is rare. So it was very, very cool.
There's a reason you missed KYW, because you had so many incredible experiences there. And yet at one point in your career, you sort of said, it's time to move on. Yes. What was the impetus for that? And take us through the path that you took after.
Well, the next level in aspirations as a photojournalist is get to the network. You work for the network, and I loved NBC, and I always wanted to work for NBC. And Ellen, who left KYW, went to NBC. So she said, well, if you want to freelance, I'll definitely hire you. And she knows I do photo essays, people pieces, like long form really well. And we'll put you on Today's Show and you'll do features. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But I wasn't staff. And I still was full-time at KYW. The union and management were going through a downsizing. They were kind of at an impasse, and management said, we want to reduce headcount. They, go through these periods of grow and shrink. Mm-hmm. I loved everybody there. I had no enemies at KYW. Again, great friends. I mean, now 7 years of friends. And the union said that you're offering buyouts to anyone over age 50. With 20 years of service. That was age discrimination. And management goes, okay, we'll offer it to everybody in the union. Half of the 10 people that had taken it were under 30, and they lost good people that were really just saying, yeah, I'll take $22,000. Thank you very much. I'll hang up my spurs and I will go buy my own camera package, because you almost could buy a whole camera package for about 20 grand. So I ended up starting my business with the buyout. Some people went to Italy for like a month. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's your transition money. What are you going to do afterward? But I wasn't going to do that. I was like, I'm going to start a business. And at that point, I let the world know that I was available as a freelancer. And that definitely lifted me from like 91 through 96. I was really enjoying working for NBC and a bunch of others. The rotating Oprahs would come through, the crime and punishment shows would come through. We'd do interviews, and we got to get around, which was really, really cool.
But you started Keystone Pictures right away when you left KYW?
I did.
Because you're the founding partner, right?
I did. I wanted a name that felt like you remembered, like, oh, Keystone, I know that name. It felt like it's been around for a while, because at Upstart, you have no brand. And I remember the Keystone Cops. I remember Keystone Studios from the 1900s. Pennsylvania had a Keystone Pictures already.
Keystone State.
And there was a defunct Keystone Pictures in Pittsburgh that sold archive photos, that their name was legally available. I'm like, I'm taking it. So I took Keystone Pictures, and the idea of pictures was more like just imagery, but also was the ability of films, like maybe we'll do film someday. So in 92, I made that basically DBA, doing business as. I was not incorporated though.
Okay, so you weren't incorporated, but you took a big step by starting your own company. What was the most impactful situation in your career that got you to the point where you felt like, you know what, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm meant to do for my career? Because, I was in the business and I tried to get out a number of times. I tried to go into PR and marketing, but it was in my blood. I just could not get away from it. I was tired of working 16 and 18-hour days on my feet. I thought, oh, there's got to be something else I can do. And yet I always came back to it. Mm-hmm. So did you have that kind of pull, or you just knew 100% this is what you wanted to do?
I think because that's what I did and I was successful at it. When I was a freelancer back in the 90s and really like most of the 90s, I was making more money than I've ever dreamed. I just could not believe how much money I was making. And I felt successful by the dollar sign. I had won awards and I was in demand and I was getting opportunities to travel and do fun things and meet wonderful people. I'm like, this could never be any better. But I kept doing this one thing over and over again. I would go down to do Kiplinger personal financial reports, which one day, then it became 2 days a month. I would go down there with a producer named Charlene, and we'd interview the Kiplingers. And these were financial experts. Knight Kiplinger, Kevin and Ted, Janet, they were the people that wrote the magazine. They wrote the Washington letters, and they knew business. And, after a couple of years of listening to them quietly behind the camera, I started putting it together in my head. Like, oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. Open an IRA, blah, 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 blah. And because I was making enough money that I had money to spend. But I had the great privilege of going out to lunch with Kevin one day. And he asked me, how's my company doing? I said, we're making lots of money, but I can't grow. And without missing a beat, Kevin said, you know what your problem is? I'm like, oh my God, tell me, what's my problem? He goes, you're Michelangelo. I go, no. I am not an artist. I am a commercial photographer. You see it, I make it happen. You want it to look ugly? I'll make it look ugly. Make it want to look pretty? I'll do that. He said, no, that's not what I mean. Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the chapel. It is a legacy. It stands the test of time. He goes, it was one person that when he died, he had his paints, he had his paintings, and that's all there was. Now, granted, they were gifts to the world to this day, but he says, you need to be the guy that paints the outside of the chapel. I'm like, the outside of the chapel? What do you mean? He goes, you go around and you have a crew of people that paint the outside of the chapel. I'm like, oh, you're right. So basically I could be painting 3 chapels in one day. You're the chapel guy. I'm like, okay, I need partners. At that point, segue time, I'm at 2001. I've been working with Andy Obeck and Rob Marish for years for the Banyan Group and all the things we did for Discovery and TLC. And I love these guys. These guys were people I trusted. We would share gear. I helped finance their cameras because, Rob needed a camera. So I bought a camera. We would share it. Andy and I bought a camera together. And then we would all just share revenue. And we were really rolling. And I suggested, why don't we paint the outside of the chapel? Why don't we become one company and go under the umbrella of Keystone Pictures? Because we can set it up. It's already an established entity. Sure enough, we formed Keystone Pictures in October of 2002. And we became a company that went, instead of like this, we went like this. We got wider and got taller. And that allowed us to maybe pick and choose what we wanted to do. We had employees starting to help us. We started doing crafted work again. It wasn't about how quick you could do it, how cheap you could do it. It was more or less, how many of these can we do in a day? It's like, figure it out. Rob, you're here. Darryl, you're there. Andy, you're there. Okay, we got this guy over there. And we deployed. And that gave us the ability to take a company vertically and outwardly and created growth. And that Kevin McCormick, last name, was, again, one of those people that said something so simple. Eyes were open, ears were open, and I heard him and I responded. And to this day, I credit him for the bravery of taking on partners, which is sometimes a scary proposition.
Well, and now, we spoke to Tim Archibald as well as Rob and Andy at this point. And you guys have this fierceness about you and an edge that really sets you apart from other production companies. And there's a lot of competition in this industry, a ton of it. But you have developed a reputation in the industry of, just being leaders, being able to be, flexible. You can really manage all the details for a client. And even with the pandemic for the last 2.5 years, you were able to reinvent yourselves to an extent. Talk a little bit about the challenges of having a business, because it ebbs and flows, and you guys have all had your ups and downs. Take us into, your current situation of, today in 2022. Where is Keystone Pictures? Where do you see yourselves being in 5 years, 10 years?
Right. I think we always try to over-deliver and offer our services at a fair and honest price. And that became one of our internal mottos, that we're going to do this work. We are not going to be the most expensive, but we're going to achieve, and we're going to be, we used to call ourselves MacGyvers. A MacGyver. I still do. But if you're under 30, you don't know who MacGyver is. Like a Swiss Army knife. You can do anything. Like, we need to do a gaffer. We need to do an audio person. We basically did everything. And what we quickly found was happening as reality TV became this monster in the industry. There was so much work and not enough people that production coordinators across the country would say, if I call Keystone and I say, I need a DP, I need a second camera operator, all the gear, I need an audio person, I need 2 PAs, I need a grip and a gaffer, a week from now, They made one phone call and they got all that done for them. And they really appreciated that. Like one call meant that they just nailed all that. And we would just, in some cases, hire subcontractors to do the work for us. And we try to internalize first, staff it first inwardly or internally, and then we would fill in. And we met some great freelancers, BJ Schmidt, and Robert Balashevsky and JP Daly were all great people. Andy's brother Tim was one of our great early freelancers, and they carried the flag and they owned it. They were owners of the idea that Keystone over delivers and solves problems. And that to this day has been a hallmark of our best freelancers.
The other thing that you guys have done is take interns, and internships are such a valuable education for students in college. And it's something that I didn't really have a lot of opportunity when I was at Penn State. It just wasn't the same as it is now. You are able to bring in interns and develop them, and many you've had as full-time employees. What do interns bring to the table that offers a unique position for you to not just incorporate them into your business, but also help develop their skills?
Interns bring to us that young mind. They all want to be directors. What do you want to be in this? I want to be a director. I'm like, that's awesome. You don't ever take your eye off that prize, because you can if you want to be, and they will make their own journey and discover they can or can't. But at least you never stray them from the thought. But in the meantime, I said, are you okay helping us load the van? Oh, of course. We load the vans. We show them the gear. We set it up and test it. Here's how it all works. We get there. We're going to lean on you a little bit. First thing you do is always ask, what can I do to help? If you're doing nothing, what can I do to help? And we always give you an answer. Plug in the monitor, run a BNC, tape down those cables on the floor, pull those curtains shut, ask that person outside to be quiet. We engage. They do not watch. If you have an internship at Keystone Pictures, if you're watching and that's our fault. We also tell them, we'll never ask you to do anything here that we will not do with you. If it's take out the trash, we're taking it out together. You're not a coffee getter, because we make our own coffees for ourselves. So you are hands-on. And one time I put my head in my hands. I'm like, oh my gosh, I won't mention the client, but we had an intern running a camera for a live event because the camera person was stuck in traffic that we hired. And by the time they were going to get there, the event was already started. I'm like, I need you to get a crash course in camera. Come on over here. Like zoom, focus, headroom. I said, don't worry, put on the headphones. I'll talk you through it. I felt like Lloyd Bridges in Airplane. I'm going to get that plane in the ground. Don't worry. Nobody panic. And they did a great job. And I was like, you know what? Applause. You stepped up in a crisis. And that's where I think my interns, when they have a moment to shine, they do. We appreciate it. And there's a little saying that one of my partners says, make it so your internship ends. And when it's time for you to leave, we won't let you because we need you.
Right. Well, I mean, Jason Hall was your first intern, and he worked for you for 8 years. He ran the post department, and now he's one of your clients.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I missed Jason, because Jason was the first. He's a perfect. In fact, I think he's the one that was told to first. That expression by Rob.
Oh, really?
I think he was the first.
Well, he was a Drexel student.
Absolutely.
If you had to give advice to a young person who was wanting to break into the business, what would that be? What would you tell someone?
Well, don't stray from your desires. Like passion will fire you, your drive forever. Going to work is a short-term thing. Like I have a job. If you ever have a job, you're just putting in the time. If you have a passion, you have a career. And I look for passion. So I would never dissuade someone from being a director. I said, look, there's steps that you need to take. Learn the technical side. Even if you're never going to do audio, you can appreciate when you are in charge. I have rustle in the clothing. You know what it's like, because that shirt has so much starch in it. Can I put the mic on the outside? Can I redress it? You understand lighting, how it's such a craft. Lighting to me is a life study. You never fully learn lighting. It's infinite possibilities of color and shadow and contrast. Lighting is a beautiful thing to study your whole career, because it really makes or breaks the picture or the show. So even if you aspire to another department, knowing that you've come from the ranks of the crew and knowing that a crew hurts when they don't get lunch, because even though call time was 7, we were at the shop at 5 to load the van, to drive to set, to park the van, to unload the van. So we're going to get lunch 6 hours later. That's really 8 hours later. That lunch is not always just nourishment. It's a time to break from the insanity. Just like stop, relax, recenter, then charge back into it for the second half of the day. I was sad to see days went from 8-hour days to 9-hour days to 10-hour days to 12-hour days and then off the clock lunches. This is something that really has been an undermining force, I feel, to our industry. And finally, some unions are standing up to it. And I like that because of safety. I mean, people that wrap at 3 a.m. have to be back at 7 a.m. That's just inhumane. And our industry, which is predominantly left-leaning, should be more sensitive to this than anybody. That we fight for workers' rights, and they should be aware that we too have those same needs. And I digress here. I got a little.
And you're not part of a union.
I'm no longer in a union, but I've been in two.
If somebody was in the union, that wouldn't happen if it's a union shoot. But
that's
so
true.
Much of the work that we do is non-union work.
It is. And I still respect and still am proud that I've served in 2 unions, and I'm very pro-labor. And people see it here. Like, I ask 3 times a day, did my crew get lunch on that job? Because that client never buys lunch. And I found out they did. They got boxed lunches, and I was happy because I care about how we feel when we do what we do. You must answer the basic needs of a human, like time, comfort, food, rest. That has to happen, and that's important to me. And I do drive that agenda here. And if somebody has a bad day, I try to dissect it. Why was it a bad day? And understand like where that rift came from and try to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Where do you see yourself like in the next 5 years, or Keystone? Where do you see Keystone in the next 5 years or 10 years? I know you're planning.
Yeah. Yes, we are. We're focused on growth, and growth meaning basically pivoting. During our bad years, we were forced to pivot. We had to say, we just don't do, like, Rob is beyond certain jobs in our industry, but I will do this because we're changing light bulbs to get more efficient light bulbs. We're dropping cell phone services. We're cutting internet, like during the Great Recession. During 2016, we had a really rough year, and we sucked it up. And we had to look at each other and say, do we want to take other jobs? And we hung in there. I think we're the Rocky story of Philadelphia because, you know what, we came out, we're still standing, we're still fighting, and we're willing to pivot and grow. And the fact that we're 20 employees now, and every one of these people are either magic elves or they are wizards. They make stuff happen. I'm so proud of that. I think the next step for us is a succession of leadership onto my partners and possibly anyone else that we could bring in to help drive the vision. And really what I'm going to announce it here. First time you're hearing an exclusive, Jody. What is going to be our vision statement is we deliver wow in everything we do. If you're an employee, we want you to be wowed by this experience. If you're a client, we want you to be wowed. It's the idea of going to the fireworks with an expectation. And then when it's over, you go, wow. It was worth my time. And that is what we do. And we focus on it in every way. That we now have we have refreshments, drinks, and food back here, which is really a dangerous thing. Wow, this is a beautiful refrigerator, a little frosty LED light. Wow, we got lots of drinks in there. Wow, wow, wow. You got my favorite chips. That type of thing on a very small level, all the way up to the top. I see myself retiring in the next 5 years. I think I'll always be interested in what's going on here, dropping in like Darryl's coming in, let's have pizza party, something. But I think I'm going to focus that Keystone Pictures remains a source of business and work for all our employee and our clients, that as the years wear on, that durability that Michelangelo had with his art is maybe our business called Keystone Pictures. It's durable. It's been around for right now, 22 years. Maybe someday it'll be around for 30, 35, 40 years. They've been around forever. That would make me the most proud to know that this idea has become a durable entity.
Well, you guys are durable, and you've managed to evolve and pivot and come out shining on the other end. It's not always easy, but you all do make things easier for clients. We work together a lot. as, collaborators.
Yes.
And you bring me in, I bring you guys in, and there's no other group of people that I would want on set with me at any given time than the Keystone Pictures guys.
Thank you so
and
much.
Gals.
Yes.
You're growing.
Yes,
I love it.
we
well,
are.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure we'll have you back on. I look forward to speaking with you again at another time.
That might be a couple hours from now when I get home.
When you get home. Okay,
All right.
funny.
Love you. Love you. Thank you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.